What is going on? John Middlekauff, the Volume 3 and Out podcast, Monday, draft week. Subscribe to the Volume's YouTube page. Subscribe to the 3 and Out podcast below in the description. Let's talk some football. Okay, I just pressed record on the microphone, and it's the middle of the day on Monday. So we are, less than 4 days away from this draft getting underway. And the Jags, who have been, they're probably, market size. I mean, they might be bigger than Green Bay or whatever, but to me, they're the most irrelevant franchise in the league. And I do think they've gotten two guys who are, let's face it, Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson. And let's start with Trent. Pretty polarizing individual, right? I live in the Bay Area, 49er guy. All my friends and family are. You say his name, it brings up and evokes emotion. And I think when you are a public figure, like truly famous, like an NFL football coach, an actor, a singer, and this is kind of true, you would say, in the city you live in with your friends and family, perception becomes reality, right? When you say something about someone, you're going to have a perception of famous people. Like if I say Leonardo DiCaprio, most people will be like, oh yeah, he sleeps with a lot of women, right? If I say Bill Belichick, you'd be like, ornery old SOB. If I say, Steph Curry, you'd be like, oh, a lot of fun. Just a good guy, right? LeBron James, control freak. Like you just have these perceptions of these people that you don't necessarily know, right? Singers, actors, athletes, and coaches and executives. And I think Trent Baalke, fair or not, I've said it before, I can only speak to my own experiences. He was always pretty cool to me, but I never worked for him. I was never around him in a professional setting beside just kind of bullshitting with him. When I was on radio, he came on the radio and he was always like giving me props. He was cool. But that is not the reaction that most people have inside the business. So then people on the outside, and for a long time it was the Bay Area because he was the reason Jim Harbaugh left. And then it became, once he took over last year, the rest of the NFL all has an opinion on him. And I'm talking the fans that think Trent Baalke is kind of a bad guy and think he's an idiot, thinks he's bad at his job. And listen, I saw firsthand, he made some pretty good moves. He was a big part of getting Jim Harbaugh to come to the 49ers once upon a time. They used to go on jogs, like in 2011 when Jim first got the job. He made some great signings in free agency and some great early draft picks. But we don't think about that anymore. We just think about this power-hungry, bad guy who somehow keeps getting big jobs. And now he's got Trevor Lawrence, who's his starting quarterback. And Doug Peterson, a lot of times when you've won a Super Bowl or accomplished whatever in an industry like the NFL, like if I was a venture capitalist and I hit some home run as an investor, I would get another shot immediately. People would give me money to go invest more. Doug Peterson didn't just win a Super Bowl. The following year, he won another game with Nick Foles. He couldn't get a job last year. Now, I know he's claimed he took a year off. No one was going to hire him. And I would argue even this cycle, it was going to be a struggle for him to get a job. And if it wasn't the Jags, he was not going to become a head coach, which is pretty crazy. And I'm not claiming him to be like John Harbaugh or Andy Reid, but he's pretty damn good. We see these coaches get hired every year, Joe Judges of the world, and Doug Peterson couldn't get a job immediately. He wasn't just the head coach. He was the play caller. So the perception on these guys, one, Trent Baalke, bad guy, in over his head. I saw a report today that him and the owner are already at odds over who to pick. He wants to take Walker, the kind of Aldon Smith of this draft, trying to hit a home run. The owner wants to go safe, Aiden Hutchinson. And honestly, it could be true. It might not be true. But with Trent, we always believe. Because when there's always kind of feels like there's some smoke with Baalke, and then there's always been fires in the past. So it's believable. And then Doug, who I think has been discounted, like we saw this guy for years in a big boy market where it's really, really hard to be successful. It is not easy. It ain't Chip Kelly alive. Sirianni actually was pretty impressive. But it's not a place where most guys are going to go have success. Philly, New York, they run through Washington. It's intense. He handled it with ease. And now he gets to take over this quarterback who just a year ago, and I've had a lot of people DM me, and I think it's fair. And I'd be lying if I said I watched a lot of Jags football, but clearly he struggled. Now, I would defend Trevor Lawrence that any young guy who is used to stability, high level, just consistency in their life goes to chaos, it can overwhelm you. And I am not going to judge a guy that came from Clemson, probably the most stable program in the country beside Alabama. But unlike Alabama, he had the same coaches. It was just stability, consistency, and then went to Urban fucking Meyer, who didn't even make it through the year. It was a complete shit show. Excuse my language, little kids, if you're listening. Earmuffs. But the reality is that there is going to be some pressure on this guy that we said, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, like that level of a prospect. Doug Peterson, we've seen him. He's coached Carson Wentz, who was drafted 2 overall in his best year under Doug Peterson. We've seen Trent Baalke take a team and win. But here, you can't deny there's a lot of pressure. This franchise is drafted 1 overall. They have this quarterback just to kind of figure it out. And ultimately, if they screw it up, especially Trent Baalke, like he is going to be a Gettleman-like laughingstock. Because I'd argue he kind of is right now, and I think it's a little unfair. Now, granted, he's brought some of this on himself, but, the Jags, this is a big couple days for them just to kind of get the train back on the tracks. Because when you have the number 1 overall pick, if you hit a home run, you get a guy under contract. If he immediately becomes a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, is one of the best deals in the league. And whether this draft, I don't think it's that great, but that doesn't mean great players won't come from it. It's just not going to – it's going to be all over the map. Like there'll probably be a Pro Bowler in the third, which there are every year. But in this draft, I think there are going to be so many guys, and you've seen it around. I thought Peter King writing about this, and I just talked to people in the league, that some guys are going to get drafted like in the teens that other teams have rated number 50. Some guys are going to get drafted number 50 that another team, because there are a bunch of teams that don't have picks, would have taken in the first round. And that is, I would say, a little not typical. Last year, the top 50 picks, I would say in the league, the overwhelming majority had like a group of 35-40. Like most people were on the same page. Not the case in this draft. Jim Nagy had a tweet yesterday. He is the director of the Senior Bowl. And he used to work for, I think, Belichick. Then he worked for Scott Pioli. He tweeted about Ben Simmons because Ben Simmons was supposed to come back for the Nets forever. He's supposed to come back for Game 4. And, of course, he's not coming back. And it feels like his season's over. And his tweet basically said that Ben Simmons' situation is going to make every general manager in the league overthink their board, or at least relook at their board given people's character. And I actually saw Lewis Howes. He has like I don't even know if it'd be called a motivational podcast. He has interesting guests, high-level guy. It's just a good podcast. And I was, scrolling Instagram today, and I saw this, I just follow some random accounts that have like, I don't even know if they're like leadership quotes, but they just have videos of people talking about interesting stuff. And he had this statement that said, like, to have a healthy relationship, you need more than love. And his point was basically like, we're told when we're kids, find someone you love, marry them, and you'll be happy forever. And he's like, that's a big part of it. But you also need to have similar values, similar vision. Because if you're going to get married at 25, 30, 35, if you're relatively healthy, you're going to live another 40 years. So, listen, I know I've changed dramatically from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You should be evolving. And you have to you got to be with someone who's somewhat on the same page as you in terms of life. And I think when you're looking for players, like part of like Patriots, why they have their Patriot guys, their core guys over the years, Mike Vrabels, Teddy Bruschi's, Devin McCourty's, Slater's, because they get guys that fall into their vision. Guys that want to be high achievers, right? And Ben Simmons, I think the knock on him, a lot of people think he does not like basketball. And there are people in every pro sport, baseball, basketball, football, that don't like their sport. They were given these athletic gifts from the man upstairs, and they're just get special gifts. And they're able to monetize it, and they do it like most human beings. What Ben Simmons is like 6'9", 6'10". Walk around downtown, any city. You won't see one person that's 6'10". He is just an outlier in terms of his height immediately. Then obviously he's really skilled, but I think it's pretty clear he doesn't like basketball. And there have been guys in the past, like Jadeveon Clowney is a good example. Jadeveon Clowney, if you look, has had a solid career. He's gonna play for a long time in the league. He was drafted number 1 overall. But I think people have questioned, like, how much does he really like football? He's almost viewed as an underachiever because it's like how good he could have been. Is he really all in on football? Does he like what football provides? Ndamukong Suh battled that a little bit for a while too. Now, I think he's got with the right people in Tampa and has really excelled. But I think both those guys, if you look, Suh and Jadeveon Clowney would almost be viewed as underachievers. They should have been, no doubt about it, Hall of Fame players. And Suh's probably had a better career when it's all said and done than Clowney. But I think if you ask most general managers and coaches, like, yeah, it probably should have been more. And when you're drafting a guy, and we talked about this a lot last week, we're going to talk about this forever. You're drafting a person before you're drafting the player. You need this guy to have all of his chips in the middle and basically be obsessed. When I think of most of the great players in my adult life, which is basically the last 20 years, they have been football junkies. Obviously the quarterbacks, but you just go around to other positions. Ed Reed, right? When I think Ed Reed, you think a guy who's just like kind of half in, half out? Richard Sherman. I had a chance to just be around him a little bit. That guy loves football. I mean, an absolute junkie. And you just go position by position. The best players, some of the great players right now, Travis Kelce, Devontae Adams. Football's their life. And the media often, when these stories come out of like unnamed scouts, they get up in arms when they're like, why do we care if the guy's balanced? Because a lot of people in life, when they're going to be great at an industry that's very competitive, very, very competitive, you can't really be balanced. You have to be somewhat psychotic. And it's hard to kind of know that with young people, right? Because you can get the information. I've gone into these schools, you ask around, and it's hard to truly know. So you're taking educated guesses. But the more and more guys that you can get that are just, football is a huge part of their life, right? A massive part of their life. You can build your franchise around guys like that. I was with the Eagles when we drafted Jason Kelce. He's going to go down as one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise. Because when you talk to people in that building, when you talk to people in the city of Philadelphia, the guy's all in on football. Football means everything to him. Being a team leader means a lot. Being a team captain, battling on Sunday, working through the week. And we're going to have all these players be drafted. A large percentage of them are not going to play well in the NFL. And a large percentage of those guys would have had the talent to excel in the league. But maybe they don't like football as much as they think. Maybe they don't actually like work, because a huge part of football is working at it. I say it all the time. Baseball, you get to play every day. I saw Christian Yelich, right? Brewer star, signed him to $180 million a couple years ago, is kind of struggling right now. His career feels like it's trending down. If he gets to play every day. All it takes is like 2 weeks of batting 500, hitting 7 home runs. Boom, he's back on track. He doesn't have to wait once a week to play. Even in the NBA, you get to play all the time. Even in the playoffs, you're playing 3 times a week. In football, you get 1 shot a week. You get 17 games. And most of the teams aren't making the playoffs. So you got to love everything else that comes with football. Studying, lifting. Like, listen, I'm not a huge fan of lifting. Lifting's hard, and especially the way you have to do it in football. Heavy weights. Most people are not doing the Tom Brady pliability thing. They're hitting squats. They're working on their lower body. Like, working on your lower body is hard. Training in the summer, in the heat. It is very, very difficult. So the teams that draft the best are the best at identifying the people, because they put those people with the people already in their building that are high level, and then you get success. The teams that struggle can never figure out the pieces of the puzzle. They never can. I was listening to this financial podcast talking about Elon Musk, and obviously he just bought Twitter, but he hires such elite guys at Tesla. Like, these venture capitalists were like, the people that know, most of us have no clue who these actual individuals are, but clearly he gets really, really high-level people that are running Tesla. That's why the thing's dominating and printing money. He's the richest man in the world. So you have to have a vision and know what you're getting, and then with that vision, get the right people, because this is ultimately a people business. John Lynch talked today, and I wouldn't say he shot down the rumors. I mean, there isn't a rumor. Deebo Samuel went to Jeff Darlington and requested a trade. Like, that happened. I mean, it's not, there is no narrative out. He requested a trade. Now, John Lynch made it pretty clear they're not in the business of trading Deebo Samuel, and they shouldn't be. I say this, Belichick trades everyone. Actually, he doesn't. Belichick did second and third contracts for many of his stars over the years, like Gronkowski, McCourty, obviously Brady, but Richard Seymour got a second contract. Logan Mankins got a second contract. He did not let every guy walk in their second contract. He extended core guys. And when you get great players who are core members of your team, you keep them. Now, you can't control when a guy wants a trade, and who knows, unless Deebo comes out and gives us the bullet points of why, we're all just making educated guesses. Is it California? Is it playing running back? Does he want to be closer to home? Is it the taxes? Who knows? We're all taking educated guesses until he speaks, and he hasn't spoke on the details, and who knows, he might not. But John Lynch made it pretty clear, we're not in the business of trading Deebo Samuel. He didn't say under no circumstances will we trade Deebo Samuel, because just a couple years ago, he traded DeForest Buckner for the 13th pick. And I saw Rap Sheet say today on McAfee's YouTube show that underrated part about McAfee's YouTube show, he's obviously an absolute rock star in the media landscape. He has a football show. His start, now obviously he's a former football player, but he talks 90% football. It's pretty clear what's king in America. If he did that with basketball or baseball, it would not work. He does a football show. I say it all the time with Peyton Manning, like everyone's trying to do a Manning cast. That works because it's Peyton Manning. There's the baseball cast ain't going to work. The basketball cast has no shot. The football thing works, one, because of the NFL and it's Monday Night Football, and two, because it's Peyton freaking Manning and Eli Manning. You can't just do it with anyone. Like Pat McAfee is a pretty unique character, and he's talking about the biggest league by a mile. But back to the Jets. The Jets have no shot to get Deebo Samuel for pick 10 because his rap sheet told McAfee that basically the two trades that happened for Devontae and for Tyreek added up to the 13th overall pick, give or take, on the value chart for the draft, which, makes sense if you just do the basic math. Well, both those guys were going on to their third contract. So like I said about Belichick, the Packers and the Chiefs extended those guys when they were in Deebo's shoes. So it's crazy to not extend the A.J. Browns, the Deebo Samuels, the Terry McLaurins. The whole point of being a general manager, being a head coach, running an NFL operation is to find guys like Deebo Samuel and then keep them in their prime. Now, contract negotiations, I don't care what industry you're in listening to this, are difficult. They're not easy. And the older you get and the more leverage, I remember being 27 or 28 years old and getting offered jobs. Like, yeah, I'll take it. You'll pay me 50 grand to do the West Coast. I'm in. You'll give me 85 grand to host a radio show. I'm in. You just didn't care. But the older you get, the more success you have, it can get contentious. You want certain things. You have certain demands, just like the other side does. And in the history of pro sports, but specifically football, it's not always simple. Quarterbacks have become relatively simple. Position players have not. And it's because injuries, right? More people get hurt in the sport of football than the other sports, especially at certain positions. When I pay a defensive lineman, when I pay a running back, when I pay a tight end, like at any moment, their leg can get snapped. Their career can end. It happens like once every other year. A guy's career is just over in the prime of his career. So I understand, like I always get both sides. And I tend to be a little more team management because team management, the more success they have, the more fan-friendly it is. The more fan-friendly it is, the more success the league has. And I'm paid to talk about the league. I want the league to thrive. And I've said it before, the NFL is not going to be on top forever. Right now they're humming. And it might last 10 years, it might last 20, but one day, kids, I'll promise you this, and anyone listening with young kids, they watch people play video games right now. The video game industry in my lifetime is going to be massive. If you tell me the video game industry at one point in time has more people watching than live sports, it might be 2050, but it's coming. I do believe that the Jets should be, quote unquote, overpay. And I don't think it's crazy for them to overpay. They're in a division that's loaded. Belichick is the greatest coach of all time and has a playoff team. The Bills are a powerhouse. The Miami Dolphins, while they have some unknowns, do have a lot of good players and have been winning lately. The Jets are clearly the fourth team in that division. Their quarterback needs a lot of help. Well, who is a guy that can immediately help a quarterback? A guy that you can hand the ball off or throw to him behind the line of scrimmage in Deebo Samuel. Now, it does not behoove the Niners to give them for pick 10. I've said it over and over. Pick 10 in a bad draft isn't that valuable. And I don't, like, yeah, I'm giving you Deebo Samuel for pick 10, but I no longer have Deebo. Literally just carried me to the playoffs. So if you want Deebo Samuel, who is on my team, and I do not need to trade, you have to pay almost, $1.75 on the dollar. I would demand pick 10, one of the second round picks, and honestly, the first round pick next year. And most people would say, no chance you do that. Then you don't get Deebo Samuel. But the Jets are in desperate need of life. This is a bad draft. Whoever they pick, especially if it's an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, no one's paying for tickets to go see that guy play. Now, if the Jets do draft with the 10th pick, Garrett Wilson or whatever, and he turns into Justin Jefferson, for sure. But it's risky. It's why I would probably not trade Deebo Samuel under any circumstances if I'm the Niners, even if I got pick 10, pick 38, and next year's one. Because more than likely at pick 10, I'm taking Olave or Garrett Wilson. And I just think, and we've talked about this before, there are no sure things in the NFL. There is no such thing as a high floor. Because we've always said, this guy's a high floor, this guy's a high floor. And half those guys don't even make teams. They get cut. They get washed out of the league. So and especially at wide receiver, I think we've become accustomed to think it's so easy now to find a wide receiver, plug and play, and that guy becomes a star. Jalen Reagor still happen. Like, not every guy's Justin Jefferson. Not every guy's Jamar Chase. So you got to be very, very careful. But if I was the Jets, I would get overly aggressive. I don't think it's crazy given the situation they're in and how desperate they're just for some juice, for some people to care about them. So it wouldn't totally shock me if they come with an aggressive offer. And hell, the Niners might, even if they came with a crazy offer, still might say no. This draft, I've been thinking a lot about, and I talked to a guy in the NFL a while back who said, and I remember this when I'd go to pro days, some of these older scouts would get mad, like when a guy would decline to run. And I didn't know any better. I was like, yeah, you should be running. And then now that I've seen, kind of can take a big picture view of it all, if I had a client who was slow, we would never run. Because the moment you run and you run slow, it hurts your draft stock. Because I've said it over and over, this is an economic exercise. And your 40 time, while probably a little overrated in the grand scheme of things, is a determining factor of where you're going to go in the draft. Because if you play safety or you play wide receiver and your card is up there on the board, a lot of boards are digital now, and it says 460, it's hard for me to pull the trigger as a GM, as the head coach, as the owner with that time not great. It's much easier to draft, and it's not saying it's right to draft a guy that ran a 4.41. It's very easy to draft Chris Olave. It's very easy to draft these wide receivers and these corners that fly. Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, who actually has a podcast with the Notre Dame guys, ran really slow. And for a long period of time, he was going to be, and I agree because I watched him play at Notre Dame and I thought, this guy is a star. This guy is a baller. He is going to be a top 5 pick. Then he goes to the combine and runs a 4.50 or 4.55, and then runs at his pro day, or maybe it was like a 4.58, runs at his pro day even slower. So now people around the league think he's slow. And now you hear these mock drafts and people talking about him like he might go in the mid-teens. Before he ran, just based on his film, he was viewed as a top 5 pick. And when I watched him, I thought, this guy's a top 5 pick. This guy's going to play in the league. And then he runs slow, and now he's talked about going in the teens. I was listening to Michael Lombardi's podcast, and he was talking to someone with a team that's picking in the late teens that goes, Hamilton might fall to us. Drake London, who got hurt during the season, broke his ankle. So, slow to rehab, but he's healthy now, refused to run. Why? He's not fast. Most people in the league think he'd run 4.6, but he didn't run. So there is no time next to his name. And he's being talked about potentially going in the top 10. Well, if Drake London had ran either at the combine or at his pro day and put up a 4.64, there's zero chance on God's green earth he's going in the top 15. Now, maybe when the dust settles, he ends up not going in the top 15. But if he had that time on his card, no chance. Kyle Hamilton is going to lose money. He did lose money for running slow. So if my client is not going to be fast, we ain't running. And on the flip side, I've said it all the time. Lamar Jackson cost himself millions of dollars because he didn't run at the combine. Period, point blank, end of story. If Lamar Jackson, we've seen a guy play for 4 years. He's fast as a mother. I mean, I would guess 4.31. He'd probably run the fastest quarterback time in the history of the combine. Maybe RG3 ran high 4.3s, low 4.4s. I think he would be the fastest quarterback in the history of the combine. Maybe there have been like guys that transitioned to other positions, but probably not. I mean, he just would never have gone 32, but he refused to run because people thought he was a wide receiver. Well, some of these guys run and then they hurt themselves. And I think Hamilton's a good example of a guy that's just trying to do the right thing because he's a competitor and then it hurts him. Drake London refuses. And now it's like, well, and I've heard people that are pretty torn on him. Some people think he's going to be a really good player. I know when I watched him at USC, I thought he was a stud. But I've talked to other people that think he's sluggish, think he's not fast enough. And sometimes, the contested catch guys, it's harder for them to transition in the league. Speed always translates, right? Chris Olave is going to get open immediately. Like even Henry Ruggs, who is going to be in jail. By the second year, it was clear like he could get open with ease. And he wasn't even a great route runner. Olave is. When you can go that fast, like it's just harder. The corner is reacting to you. He's backpedaling. You're running forward. Well, even the backpedaling, most of these corners are now 4.4 guys. If you're a 4.65 guy, you have to have some special traits. Now, the positive on Drake London is he's very physical. He's a tough MFer. I mean, contested catch guys. But I would say the contested catch guys make people in the league a little nervous. The Giants, right now, there's some rumors about them getting rid of their former first-round pick, Kadarius Toney, last year, who was a guy that had red flags coming out. Here's what I know. When you hire a new general manager and you hire a new head coach, and we see, 5 to 7 of them every single year, every guy on that roster, unless it's like an Aaron Rodgers, is basically immediately available. Because there is a chance that coach or that general manager did not like that player coming out. Doesn't think that guy fits the scheme. And then there's the character stuff of questionable character guys. Depending on what team that guy comes from, that guy was off the board. So it could just be as simple as, it's easy to be like, everyone starts fresh. That's always something like coaches love to say, or like people that take over companies love to say, like, everyone starts fresh. I don't want to know. However we start from ground zero, we'll go from here. We'll just, by open door policy, come meet me and we'll just develop a relationship from scratch. That's not the way it works in the NFL. Because when I take over as a GM, Joe Shane, who's coming from the Bills, and Dayball, they evaluated this guy last year. They would know a lot about him. They would have an opinion. So it's easy to say that, but when you come into a job, and it's going to happen in all these franchises, you're going to have an opinion on that player. It's always where it gets a little weird when the general manager stays and he hires a new coach. And then that coach doesn't like one of the guys that general manager drafted. And then it can create a little animosity because obviously that general manager thinks that player's good, but that coach may not like that guy from his previous stop or that his former organization didn't. So it can become very complicated and convoluted quickly. But I can understand where the Giants, this rumor of them getting rid of the guy, like, what if both those guys hated him coming out? Now, I saw today on Elon's app, Twitter, that Toney has been at the facility because I guess he didn't show up last week. He's been there this weekend and today. Maybe he's trying to do his part because if I was him, I'd want to be with Dayball, who's clearly a really good coach, and try to excel because it's never good being a top 20 pick and immediately getting traded going into your second year. This story, I think, came out on Friday, and I didn't pay it too much attention that the NFL is going to take over Christmas, which I didn't look at the date, I guess, on the calendar. So when I saw it, I'm like, Roger Goodell is coming for Adam Silver's throat. And obviously the last couple years, definitely last year, the NFL had games on Christmas, right? They had the Raider-Colts game, and it was Arizona played someone. I forget, but got a little drunk on Christmas. But I remember sitting at my brother's house watching the Christmas game. Well, I looked today, Christmas falls on a Sunday. So it's not that crazy. Now, reading about it, historically, when the NFL, Christmas has fallen on a Sunday, they have put a bunch of games on Christmas Eve, and they plan on doing that. The difference is instead of just putting one or even two games on Christmas, they're going triple header. They're going a 10 a.m. kickoff, a 1:30 kickoff, and a night game kickoff. And the NFL knows this, that right now, the real estate for our attention has never been more crowded. It's very, very difficult to hold my attention. Like I talked about yesterday, the Netflix thing. I truly believe Netflix quality of their shows is really, really shitty. I have never, probably the last 3 or 4 months, clicked on the Netflix app less. And it's not because, like, I'll watch whatever, but whenever I go, I can't find anything to watch that's any good. I'm much more likely to go to Hulu, go to HBO Max, because I feel their content is better. Well, one thing is clear. When the NFL is on television, their content supersedes every other live sporting event. And basically everything beside like presidential elections. You put the NFL on TV, millions upon millions upon millions of people are going to watch. It's why I've been talking about Amazon Prime. If you're one of these archaic individuals, it's like, where do I find Amazon Prime? Well, it's like you're going to figure it out if you want to watch the NFL game, because I would imagine a lot of people that aren't subscribed to Amazon Prime don't necessarily know who any of these human beings are, because I don't know one in my life, will subscribe if they're interested in the NFL. Well, the NFL, this is just, I think they're going to own Christmas forever. And that was always the NBA's day. They would have like 5 games on Christmas. I saw it firsthand because the Golden State Warriors, when they became a powerhouse, they got the prime time game on Christmas. You never wanted to miss it. It was always Warriors versus LeBron. It was a must watch. Well, the NBA is in major trouble on Christmas Day. Who the hell's watching? Not with NFL games on. And I would imagine that the league, I mean, think about last year. Like Raiders Colts, pretty good. That was a playoff game. Cardinals were a playoff team. They will not just put like Jags Texans on Christmas. It wouldn't shock me if it's like Steelers Ravens, Niners Rams. Like they'll probably go some big boy matchups to get some big boy ratings and kind of take a stranglehold. Because I would argue in anything, in any line, in any industry, when you see an opening, you have to take it. You know, you have to be aggressive when times are good and be even more aggressive when times are bad. But the NFL right now is just full steam ahead. And even in their press release, reading about it today, they called, we're not trying to infringe on our friends at the NBA. I mean, yeah, you are. You're trying to wipe them out. You're trying to take out their number one regular season day. And you're going to succeed with ease. So it's just, the NFL is just, they're in the peak of their powers right now. You know, if they were a player, they'd be in their prime. It won't last forever, but they have a long runway ahead.